auricle, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The auricle, the visible part of the ear, collects sound waves and directs them to the auditory canal. The auditory or ear canal is lined with cilia and ceruminous glands. The earwax from the ceruminous gland and the cilia protect the ear from entry by foreign matter. The thin tympanic membrane separates the outer ear from the middle ear. Sound waves cause it to vibrate. The three tiny bones of the middle ear are the hammer or malleus, anvil or incus, and stapes or stirrup. These bones pick up the vibrations from the tympanic membrane and transmit them to the inner ear. The eustachian tube of the middle ear opens into the pharynx and permits air pressure to equalize between the ear and the outside air. The inner ear is maze-like, consisting of bony and membranous structures surrounded by fluid. The semicircular canals are fluid-filled bony loops that help maintain our body's balance. The cochlea is a fluid-filled, snail-shaped structure that houses the organ of Corti, the true organ of hearing. The fluid aids in the transmission of the vibrations. The organ of Corti changes the vibrations into nerve impulses that are picked up by the auditory nerve. Sound waves are collected by the auricle, or outer ear, and sent to the auditory canal, tympanic membrane, ear bones, and then to the cochlea, where the vibrations are changed by the organ of Corti to nerve impulses and transmitted by the auditory or cochlear nerve to the temporal lobe of the brain for interpretation.
Okay, here's I'd like to show an internal example of the cochlea, the seashell looking thing that I was telling you about. This is the thing that actually produces sound. And what we're looking at is a flat section, if you roll the cochlea out, of the tectorial membrane. Now this tectorial membrane, what happens is when the stapes, the bones in the middle ear, push on that fluid from the vibration of sound, it actually moves that fluid around and it makes tiny vibrations in the tectorial membrane. And what that tectorial membrane does is it vibrates on top of those little hair cells, which then in turn interpret that vibration into electrical impulses through the nerves and into sound. And as you can see, it vibrates pretty violently sometimes. It's pretty interesting. Just wanted to explain that. Okay, now we're going to explain how that membrane vibrates on top of those hair cells. And as you can see here, here's like a cross-section of the inside of like the fluid inside the inner ear and those ducts that I was talking about. And that's in the cochlear duct that sound is produced. And as you can see there, that's a bunch of nerve tissue that he was pointing to there with his laser pointer. And you'll see here that there's a lot of blood vessels that move through here. Okay, he'll talk about it here in another thing. There's a lot of other ducts and things, but there you go. That's the tectorial membrane, and that's what is the membrane that I was telling you that vibrates on top of those inner ear hair cells, and that's what interprets the vibrations into electrical impulses in those cells, which then in turn interprets that into sound into our brains, which is really amazing stuff. But yeah, he's just going to explain that a little bit more here, but that's just what I wanted to explain, that you have those hair cells, and what happens is if that tectorial membrane vibrates too violently from too much loud sound, it can crush those hair cells and it'll just kill them. And that once those hair cells are gone, obviously you won't be able to produce sound. It's like an organ without keys.
Now, as far as that goes, that is the first cause of tinnitus. Now the next cause of tinnitus is loud sounds or noise. You may have a sudden burst of noise, or maybe you might be at a loud rock concert or listening to loud music in your headphones there. That is a very bad thing to do. That can cause not only permanent hearing damage, but it can cause problems with, because those what happens is if you listen to too much sound, you have these little hairs in your ear and in your inner ear that actually sway to and forth in the cochlea. And what happens with these hairs is when you hear a loud burst of sound, or your loud rock concert, or listening too loud of music in your headphones, it'll actually, these hairs stand up like trees, and what happens is the sound is so violent it'll knock them over flat. Well, see, there's a problem. The problem with these hair cells in the inner ear is that sometimes they'll grow back, sometimes they don't, and most of the time it's like if you drove over. Imagine it like this: if you were like driving down the road and you just drove over a tree and just completely plowed it over. Like, that's what could be described as what you're doing to your ears. And that's how violent these things happen in your inner ear. And what happens is like I said, those inner ear hair cells will die. Just like if you ran over a tree with your car, it might not spring back up, but it might die, especially if it doesn't get the proper nutrients, if you're not eating right and you're not taking care of yourself. Now, the problem is with this form of tinnitus, and a lot of people have had this, is it causes permanent hearing damage that is irreversible. There is no cure for it, and it also causes constant ringing in the ears. And some people, some deaf people actually, have been so tormented by this because they cannot use other forms of sound masking therapy to drown out the noise, that they've literally had to have electrodes implanted in their inner ear, essentially disabling all the nerve impulses to their brain by electrical stimulation to essentially cancel out the tinnitus and all hearing whatsoever. But that is, in my personal opinion, that is not a good option. Yeah, it is if there's no other option, but I believe that this not only destroys the structures of the ear, it destroys everything. So there's really not much you can do in this situation. Now, I do have some theories, and I will go into that in the later section on what can be done. The next cause of tinnitus, and this is a big one, musculoskeletal problems. I'm sure a lot of people who never had tinnitus, it just sort of came up out of nowhere. It was just like random, just like all of a sudden you just get all this ring in your ears and you don't know what happens, That's sort of what happened to me. I would never really listen to loud music. I was never around loud noises or anything. And all of a sudden I got tinnitus, and it came up out of nowhere. It was just like magic. One day, I looked around the corner, and then all of a sudden, it was really loud. Drove me freaking nuts, and I'm safe to say now that I've educated myself enough in the matter to find solutions to it. So, and I honestly believe that this form of tinnitus, as far as the tinnitus that's caused by jaw and head and neck injuries, I do believe that it can be cured. I believe it can be cured completely, and I believe that I found that cure for that. Along with it can also be caused by high blood pressure. Some of the jugular veins and big arteries that run through your head and your neck here, some of them can actually become pinched off with muscular problems, and they might give some problems with the ear or something like that. And that's one of the theories, because a lot of people they can hear their heartbeat in their head. That's another form of tinnitus, with the buzzing and stuff like that. So this is a very serious, another serious form of tinnitus. I'd say this is the most serious cause. If you have any of these symptoms, make sure that you check yourself for this first, because this is very serious. A big cause of tinnitus, and a lot of things associated with tinnitus, is a brain tumor. Now, thankfully I was checked out for all that, and I was proved negative. There was no tumors. It's called an acoustic neuroma. And what happens is in your brain, the nerve endings that run into your inner ear, where it absorbs the sound that connects to your your inner ear, what happens is these kind of form malignant tumors. And this can cause instant hearing loss or tinnitus, all sorts of stuff, vertigo. It's really bad. So make sure you get checked out with that. And the only way you can have that done is with an MRI scan of the brain. I recommend that. And the last cause, actually the second to last cause, is medication. Medication can produce tinnitus. They found that some sorts of medications, they may create different, they can thin the blood and do certain things which may dry out the bones in the ear, do all sorts of inflammation. You may be allergic to it. That's why autoimmune is another factor that is tough to decipher in diagnosing tinnitus. And the very last cause is excessive earwax and eustachian tube problems. Those can be everything from fluid to pressure built up in the middle ear. It can be from there being too much earwax in your ear. It could be all sorts of things, you know. As far as that goes, these causes of tinnitus here, a lot of them, in my personal opinion, I believe can be cured. A lot of them can be solved, except for obviously the loud noises or sound that has produced hearing damage in the inner ear. It has produced permanent hearing loss. All the other forms of tinnitus can be cured except for that, I honestly believe. But then again, I'm actually I have been working on a theory that might be able to provide some sort of avenue to essentially regrow the hair cells in the inner ear, which is something that obviously would have doctors astounded. And it's a theory that I've been working on that might be able to produce the desired effect, essentially even curing deafness. So I will cover that in another video, that theory. And let's move on to the next section now.